Act Psychology. Life and work. Franz Brendan changed into born on January 16, 1838, in Hardenberg am Main, Germany, a descendant of a strongly non-secular German-Italian-owned circle of relatives of intellectuals. His uncle Clemens Brendan and his aunt Bettina von Arni have been many of the maximum essential writers of German Romanticism, and his brother Ludo Brendan had become a main professional in social economics. From the University of Tübingen in 1862, together along with his thesis on the several senses of being in Aristotle. During this period, however, Brentano struggled increasingly more with the reputable doctrine of the Catholic Church, in particular with the dogma of papal infallibility, promulgated at the Primary Vatican Council in 1870. During his tenure in Vienna, Brentano, who changed into very crucial closer to his very own writing, did now no longer pursue his plans to finish and submit the second 1 1/3 volumes of his Psychology, however favored to submit shorter texts, maximum of which have been primarily based totally on manuscripts for public lectures. The latter changed into Brentano's first EE book to be translated into English in 1902. When in 1880 Brentano and Ida von Lieben determined to wed, they needed to confront the truth that the triumphing regulation within the Austro-Hungarian Empire denied matrimony to people who were ordained monks, even though they later had resigned from priesthood. Brentano had become private dozen, a standing that allowed him to move on coaching, however did now no longer entitle him to get hold of earnings or to oversee theses. For numerous years he attempted and useless to get his function lower back. In 1896 he settled down in Florence, wherein he were given married to Emily Ruprecht in 1897. Despite reservations within the college approximately his priesthood, he subsequently had become complete professor in 1873. Brendan has frequently been defined as a surprisingly charismatic teacher. Throughout his lifestyles he encouraged an outstanding quantity of college students, a lot of who have become essential philosophers and psychologists in their very own rights, together with Edmund Husserl, Alexis Monon, Christian von Ehrenberg, Anton Marty, Karl Stump, Kazimierz Lewandowski, in addition to Sigmund Freud. Many of his college students have become professors in one-of-a-kind elements of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Marty and Ehrenberg in Prague, Monon in Graz, and Lewandowski in Lvov, now Lviv, and so unfold Brentanianism over the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire, and is the reason the critical function of Brentano within the philosophical improvement in critical Europe, mainly in what become later referred to as the Austrian tradition in philosophy. 33 Extent, Sensory and Noetic Consciousness, had been posted posthumously with the aid of using Oscar Krauss in 1928. Brendan continually emphasized that he intended to educate his college students to assume severely and systematically, without protecting prejudices and paying undue admire to philosophical faculties or traditions. When former college students of his took a vital technique to his very own paintings, however, once they criticized a number of his doctrines and changed others to evolve them for his or her very own goals, Brendan reacted bitterly. He regularly refused to talk about criticism, neglected improvements, and hence have become increasingly isolated, an improvement that turned into bolstered through his growing blindness. Due to those eye troubles, Brendan couldn't study or write any longer, however had his spouse studied to him and dictated his paintings to her. Nonetheless, he produced some of the books in his years in Florence. In 1907, he posted Untersuchungen Arsenis Psychology, a group of shorter texts on psychology. In 1911, he offered now no longer most effective the second one quantity of his psychology from an empirical standpoint, however additionally books on Aristotle. In Aristotle and his worldview he offers a defined interpretation of Aristotle's philosophy. In Aristoteles' Lehre vom Ursprung des menschlichen Geistes Brentano maintains a debate with Zeller. This debate had begun already within the 1860s, while Brentano criticized Zeller's interpretation of Aristotle in his Psychology of Aristotle and had become pretty severe and competitive within the 70s and 80s of the 19th century. Plus, Brentano had become private dozen, a standing that allowed him to move on coaching, however did now no longer entitle him to acquire profits or to oversee theses. For numerous years he attempted and useless to get his role returned. When Italy entered conflict towards Germany and Austria at some stage in World War I, Brendan, who felt himself a citizen of all three countries, moved from Florence to impartial Switzerland. He passed away in Zurich on March 17, 1917. Brendan left a wide variety of unpublished manuscripts, consisting of poetry and letters on an extensive variety of philosophical subjects, in his remaining dwelling house in Zurich and in his summer house in Schönbuhl bei Melk. A few manuscripts had been in all likelihood left at the back of and after his death. Alfred Kostel and Oscar Krauss, who had been college students of Brentano's former pupil Anton Marty in Prague, labored at the Nachlass, moving a very good part of it to Innsbruck. Their try to installation of Brentano archive became supported with the aid of using Thomas Masaryk, a former pupil of Brentano who had emerged as founder and primary president, from 1918 to 1935, of the Republic of Czechoslovakia. As a result, in 1932 a number of the authentic manuscripts had been moved to Prague, in which an archive became founded. Alas, because of the political turbulences that had been to got here over relevant Europe, the venture made it vital to switch the archive again. Substantial components of the Nachlass had been transferred to distinct locations inside the United States. A number of it has later been returned to Europe, mainly to the Brentano Forschungsstelle on the University of Graz, Austria, and the Brentano Own Circle of Relatives Archive in Blaye, Switzerland. For an in-depth records of Brentano's Nachlass, cf. Binder, 2013.